What's the biggest barrier to climate change, and is it cost? Is it technology? What if the answer was in the friction inside of our systems, our stories, and ourselves? Welcome to Net Positive. I'm Richard Garrett, and we're here to help you transform your eco-anxiety into action through regeneration and resilience. I'm excited to have Eric Corey Fried here today with me. Eric is a futurist architect, a sustainability provocateur, and helps organizations remove the friction that is slowing down their climate innovation. Welcome to Net Positive, Eric. It's exciting to have you here. It's exciting to have this kind of conversation with you, and I've been looking forward to our chat today. Thanks for joining me.
I'm overwhelmed with enthusiasm.
Look at us. Eric is on a mission to really help make innovation effortless, from building biology to regenerative design. Eric has spent 3 decades helping teams push through.
In my fourth.
4 decades, but, I stand corrected.
I moisturize.
Sunscreen helps. And has been helping teams push through their resistance as they're unlocking their radical creativity needed to really tackle this climate change. Eric, today in our conversation, I'm looking forward to discussing the topics that we've just been gathering together, ramping up about frictionless future. I love that alliteration there. Innovation as inner strength and empathy as a metric in our built environment. But before we start to unpack that, how did you get to this place that you're in today? Was it a direct route? Was it an easy path?
No, direct and easy are not the 2 words I would use at all to describe it. I think I was naive, maybe that's naive and stubborn is probably, those are the 2 words I would use. I started out like most people. I knew I wanted to be an architect at an early age. When I was 7 or 8, I was drawing buildings. This is a very common thing that we hear from people in our profession. It also makes a lot of sense that a child would instinctively draw shelter, right? So that all tracked, and the benefit of knowing what you wanted to do at an early age is that it gives you time to think about, well, what type of architect do I want to be? And I grew up in inner city Philadelphia. Around me were these, we called them Trinity houses. They're wood-framed buildings with brick cladding, and the brick was fake, and then there were these shutters that were fake, and I just hated
What, like simulated architecture?
Yeah, it felt very, and what I loved is that they ended up creating, they were kind of up on hills, and then they created these walls, so the street became this outdoor living room, and so there was this unintended placemaking that happened, and that's where it was Philadelphia, so we played stickball and hockey and sports like that in this little living room, and then the street curved at each end, so it felt like this enclosed room. And kind of the American version of a piazza or a plaza. But again, totally unintentional, but that's kind of where I grew up.
Kids in the street.
Yeah, and then ice cream truck and
right.
car, move out of the way, all that whole deal. But I knew I wanted to be an architect that made, that advanced the architecture. And so by the time I arrived at architecture school, I had a lot of questions. In my mind, I wanted to learn how to build. And when they started teaching me, well, here's how we build, I said, well, that sounds dumb. Why are we doing it that way? just trying to understand. And again, the naive and stubborn aspects. And as I learned how we build, and these questions kept coming up, I realized there had to be a better way. So I started looking for other people that were doing it, and that's where I first found this organic architecture piece led by Frank Lloyd Wright. Mr. Wright.
Never heard of him.
He passed away 10 years before I was born, but there was this whole school of apprentices that had followed, and those are my first mentors. And then found this second group of ecological designers, and that was my kind of second wave of mentors. This idea that you could build with the materials you have, with the land that you have, and for me it was very logical, and that was the part that I think most people don't get. I'm not doing this because I'm hippie at all. I'm doing it because it doesn't make sense to put cancer-causing chemicals in a building. It doesn't make sense to use up resources until they're exhausted. It doesn't make sense to build buildings that have no air and no light. And it was me trying to just kind of come to grips with what I wanted to design places that lifted people's spirits, not places that were burdens. And that was really the impetus for it. So over the years, I realized that my job had to be, whether I liked it or not, it wasn't just the buildings I designed, but ultimately I had to green every building. So that's when it was right about 2000, 2001 that I said, I'm going to start writing, teaching, speaking, and consulting. And I'm going to do these things in this effort to try to green other people's buildings. And I didn't know if I would be good at any of those things. I didn't know if I would like any of those things, but I just felt compelled to do that. And now it's 35 years later, and now I'm old and gray and look like this. But I still feel that that's our role. Our role is to advocate. I'm offering you a better future, a better value proposition, I think. And we shouldn't have to, as designers, we shouldn't have to apologize for that.
Have you found, particularly over this career span, that this conversation with owners, occupants, et cetera, has been an easy one? Have you had to do a little education, maybe dragging, kicking, and screaming? Tell me about what that change making looks like as you're bringing these ideas and ideals to the table.
Yeah, it's not. I'm laughing because it's not easy. I think anybody who's working in sustainability knows that you have to become a bit of a salesperson, you have to become a bit of a showman, you have to become definitely a storyteller in order to convince people. What was striking to me was the roadblocks that they would throw up, the excuses, the obstacles that they would come up with, and they would kind of invent. And this is still true to this day, but I experienced this in I heard those materials cost more. Well, how do you know that? You've never researched them, you never specified them, you never used them, you're just saying it. And I find that that's what a lot of people, especially in this country, do, is we say things that sound very authoritative, and people write them down.
It sounds believable.
Oh, he must know what he's talking about because he said it with conviction. And I just found that I wasn't, again, the same thing as architecture school. Why do we do it that way? That sounds stupid. That same stubbornness but I don't understand. I'm offering you a better alternative. This is a better material. This is a better, this one doesn't have formaldehyde in it. This one doesn't have VOCs, And so it took me years of practice, and fortunately I was given a lot of design opportunities very young, and so the first 15 years of my career was doing residential work. And talk about a crash course, right? You've got, typically it's a couple, they're staring at you, and they're like, they want their new home.
Here's all of my money.
Yeah, and we've never done this before, and we're scared, and it's also marriage counseling, and so I found that
there's pictures, Pinterest boards.
I ripped out, well, this is before then, I ripped out all these magazines. That relationship is really about trust and fostering their trust, but also realizing that I can't just push a material and say, here, you should use this because it's made from recycled wine corks or whatever. They also want to know that it's durable and beautiful. They can afford it, and it'll do the job that it's intended to do. And if it's supposed to go near a sink, it can handle the water. So that over the last 35 years, I've been mentally cataloging these drags to innovation, these obstacles that people throw up, and how to overcome them. And about 10 or 12 years ago, I started thinking of this book, and it went through various iterations. The first version of the book was basically about, look how stupid everybody is. And my book agent said, yeah, this isn't, nobody's going to buy this book. I'm like, why not? And she said, because you're basically telling them how stupid they are. Nobody wants to read that book. Work on it. And so for the last 10 years or so, I'd pick it up, I'd work on it for a few months, I'd get stuck, I'd put it down. And finally, about 6 months ago, I said, maybe it was more than that, but I said, I have to either figure this out or just abandon it. Because it's been bothering. I know there's a there. And, one of my side hobbies is I do stand-up comedy. And with comedy, there's the same thing. Like, there's a joke there. You might not have the wording.
But there's a nugget.
There's a nugget of funny there. And that's how I felt about the book. I know there's a nugget of truth there. There's a nugget of something there that's worthwhile to people, but I can't call them stupid. That makes sense. What can I do? What can I do that encapsulates this? And more importantly, I can't limit it just to the sustainability crowd. This, to me, is really a book about innovation. It's really a book about how to foster and facilitate innovation in a way. And the deeper I dug, the more I realized that our brains are literally wired against innovation. Part of our limbic system is basically assessing threat and fear. So if you come in and say, hey, we're gonna do something we've never done before, and it's gonna be amazing, and you'll be the first, there's nothing but alarm bells going off in their head. And I saw this firsthand with residential clients, where you're staring, like you're having dinner with them, and then saw it on a grander scale with executive leadership teams, boards of directors, C-suites, facility teams, on and on and on. The other benefit that I have is, I do about 100 workshops a year, which sounds like a lot, but it's about 2 a week, but it's consistent. And so imagine just doing something that much for 20 years. And then I do, another 50 or 60 speaking gigs to audiences where I'm sharing these ideas. So I'm in this fortunate situation where been able to kind of trial balloon these ideas and test them out and see them in real time and tweak them instantly. And so I'm not trying to get it right on the first try. I have literally hundreds of attempts a year to try out ideas in front of clients and say, what do you think of this? And so that back and forth has been invaluable. And so that's really what the book became about, of let's catalog all of those drags that slow and drag innovation, and how do you take these frictions, I call them, and make them go away. So naturally the book became, if we're talking about frictions, the book's called Frictionless, and that's really the thing. But it's not done yet. It's not out yet, just so you know. I'm just still working on it. But it's been shaping my approach to the clients and to the projects, but even with my own internal teams, of how we talk about this in a way that gets people excited. Sustainability, if you think about it, on the one hand, sounds like a great value proposition. I'm going to give you this table, and it's got no formaldehyde in it. Right? So on the surface, it sounds like you're offering the better value proposition. But here's the trouble. By the way, the table's hard to get. By the way, we don't know if we can get 3 of the same kind. By the way, it might cost a little more. By the way, the contractor's never worked with them and he's reluctant to do it. So there are a lot of these hidden drags that stop you. And you're sitting there thinking, but I'm giving the better value proposition. You're not. You've ignored a bunch of other ones that you took for granted. And I think that's really the need for it. Sustainability, if you think about it, we have failed. Right? I was born the same year as the first Earth Day. Do the math, you'll figure it out. So my life parallels the modern environmental movement, and the modern environmental movement said we should not go here, and this is exactly where we ended up. We ended up in the exact spot we did not want to be. You cannot look around at this world that has now crossed 1.5 degrees C of warming, where everyone has now experienced climate change, where the last 10 years were the hottest years on record, where the next 5 will definitely be the 5 hottest years on record, where we keep breaking record after record and the cost of these storms keeps increasing. And no one can look at this and say, well, yeah, the sustainability movement worked. So if we're doing a postmortem here, we have to realize that our old way of preaching to people's altruism, trying to get them to understand our language, getting them to get into the weeds and technical with us, this has failed. And that's for me, it's very hard to admit that. It's very hard to look at it, but if I'm really being honest with myself and with this movement, that's the truth of it. So how do we look at this in a new way that we can move forward? We're offering a better future. We're the heroes here. Like we should not be losing. And so this is the part that started driving me crazy. And I think that's where the impetus for this kind of nagging book idea came from, or just this approach to innovation. How do we get people to innovate when their brains are telling them not to, when they need to, and when you're offering something better? Well, clearly, you're not saying it the right way, or you're not telling the story in the right way, and that's what needs to change.
Oh, I want to hang on that particular point there. So you have even taken the conversation in a direction I hadn't planned for, too.
Sorry.
No, I think that's good. I'm really curious now to talk about the power of storytelling in these discussions, and then even how do you break some of that anxiety and tension with humor?
So I've always had very funny friends, and they're funnier than I am. Especially my closest friends. Some of them are comedians, like they're professionals. I'm an amateur compared to them. But I was at a conference in 1999, and it was at that time the biggest room I'd ever done. It was like 2,500 people in a room. It was a big room, big beautiful room. And I'm going through. I remember I was talking about life cycle assessment and explaining the life cycle of something.
You see the Z's start rising.
And luckily, it was 1999, so there were no cell phones really back then. But they were just drifting off. They were just not listening. I could see, it was a well-lit room, so I could see them. It wasn't a dim auditorium, but I could see them. And so my inner comedian kicked in, and I said, well, okay, let's read the room here. This isn't working. So I just stopped, and I said, this is boring, isn't it? And they immediately perked up like daisies in the sun. I said, and then I started making analogies that were funny, and it was just riffing. And the response was immediate. It was overwhelming. Afterwards, they told me, I'm going to remember that forever. I'm going to use that line with clients. Like, you saw the impact. So I saw humor as this messenger that was very effective. And now, having done that, more than 25 years later, people come up to me and say, I heard you speak in Oklahoma City in 2006. Do you remember me? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, of course I do.
I see you've grown. But then they'll say, you told a joke about concrete and cocaine, and I still use that joke to this day. And I'm like, well, then you owe me 47. Because commission. But that's the amazing part, right? We remember song lyrics more than poems because there's a tune, right? It connects. And I think humor does the same thing. They swallow the medicine with a little bit of sugar, right? I think that's kind of the way. So I started using humor, but also metaphor and simile and, comparison. And I think my job and maybe my talent is that I'm a filter. And that's a talent that came naturally to me, taking complex ideas and being able to explain them to people. Again, just going back to when I was in school, saying, I don't understand. Why do we do it this way? It's me just trying to make sense of
Parse this out in your...
And then, I've written out 12 books, and each book is, first of all, it's a chore, and it's a ton, and it's a pain, and it's a lot of writing, and it's exhausting. But each book also has this benefit of almost like decluttering my hard drive, because I'm taking things that I learned in random order and I'm filtering it through this narrative and trying to make it entertaining and interesting and compelling and break it down. I think that's really my role here. And so the humor is just one way to do that. But ultimately, getting to your question about storytelling, your narrative, your story has to be better than the other story. And if you think about the typical one where I'm dealing with a hospital administrator and he or she is saying, well, we like our vinyl floor because it's cheap and it's durable. That's a hell of a story. That's a great story. It's cheap and it's durable. I mean, I get it. And I'm coming in with, yes, but the EPD says that, it's like, we're not going to win if everybody has to become nerds here. And so I can yell at them all day, but first of all, that's boring. They're not going to listen. They're going to tune out. Their brain is telling them he wants to change something, shut it down. Instead, I have to go, what if you had the healthiest floors in the state? What would that mean? What would that look like? What if I found you floors that were prettier and more durable and healthier? I have to overcome that default narrative, and I can't let my own biases get in the way. My job is to filter and also empathize and understand where they're coming from. I get why they're defaulting to these things because they're easy. Everybody forgets that Amazon's first real innovation wasn't that they were going to sell everything. Amazon's first real innovation was what they called the one-click purchase. That is, by definition, frictionless. I see something, one click, I don't have to enter anything else. They already have my shipping info, they already have my credit card info, and it shows up the next day. That's an example of understanding frictionless and understanding the pain points. We have to get into the same boat and understand our clients' pain points in a way that can really be profound. And that's how you make change that gets them excited.
So building on this too, from storytelling through comedy, now my mind is drifting into a little bit of improv, but also the technique and tool of yes and.
Right.
And so when you're having these kinds of conversations with hospital administration staff and they're talking about the price points of their vinyl flooring, and in your example here, you've yes-anded them of yes and what if we can find something better or equally durable or more beautiful. Tell me what that looks like in its delivery and does it change minds?
So we design a lot of cancer centers. Cancer centers are such an interesting building type because, first of all, the people that work there are doing God's work. I mean, they're amazing. The providers are the doctors and the nurses and everybody is amazing.
Literally providing help.
Literally saving lives and, with a lot of technology and a lot of research and a lot of things that are changing all the time. And so we design a lot of those cancer centers for the top cancer centers in the world, and working with them is a joy and a delight. But it's also, to me, it's also an opportunity. So we were working on a giant facility for, I won't say which client, but it's one that you've heard of. And I said, I've got a wacky idea. This is now 5-6 years ago. I've got a wacky idea. What if we didn't put cancer-causing chemicals in the cancer center, where the cancer patients are? Wouldn't that be a good idea?
Don't you think it might be good?
And I was hamming it up. I was like, because to me it's even absurd where I have to even have the conversation. But that same notion, and they know that I'm hamming it up. They're laughing. I'm laughing with them, right? We're all on the same page. Yeah, isn't this great? And they all agree. Everybody in the room, yes, absolutely. That's who we are. It's really part of our ethos. It's part of who we are as a culture. Absolutely, we should do that. I'm like, fine, settled. Okay, make a note.
That's a sentence.
And it's like 2 beats. Literally just 2 beats, and then one of the facility guys says, but I heard they're not as durable as normal materials. First of all, I haven't even named a material yet. So what is he even talking about? But I heard they're not as durable, and I heard they're more expensive. And I said, okay, let's have this conversation. because I was in a weird mood. And
Feeling a little ornery.
I felt like I had the tiger by the tail,
Yep.
and the tiger's now fighting me.
Sure.
And meanwhile, my colleagues are in the room with me. I'm not like alone here. And so I'm looking to them like, how far can I push this without you getting mad at me? And without us getting fired. But I said, okay, let's talk about, let's say they are more expensive. We don't even know what we're talking about here, but let's say the materials are expensive. Give me a number. What's a reasonable percentage above normal that you're willing to pay to not put cancer in the cancer center with the sick cancer kids? Give me, is it 12% more to not put cancer in the, and again, I'm hamming it up. And they're like, yeah, but seriously, it's a legitimate concern. I said, you're right, it is a legitimate concern. Let's talk about it. And what happened was kind of magical. Right then, we just abandoned the slides, and I just took to the whiteboard, and I said, what would make you feel at ease, right? Let's create a review process. And then we just sketched out, okay, we're going to give you big samples, 3x3, 4x4. You're going to install them. You're going to run your machines over them.
I want you to beat the hell out of them.
Beat the hell out of them. Literally, that's what I said. Beat the hell out of them. Give us feedback from everybody, not just maintenance, but providers, everybody. And then that'll create a feedback loop. And then tell us what you like or don't like. Let's try them. You have tons of facilities. Let's use them. And then let's create some overarching goals around this to drive this. What are the specific chemicals that we're particularly worried about? Let's be specific. What are the specific? So then we came up with this mantra. I think there were 5 very specific things. One was a goal to essentially eliminate all vinyl. Now in a hospital, that's really difficult, but
It's everywhere.
it's everywhere. And then I think that got fine-tuned to vinyl finishes because we didn't want to get into piping.
Right.
And the red list, that's always been an issue. So, okay, fine. And then, okay, what about formaldehyde? What about VOCs? And then it was like, well, do you want to just focus on health, or are there other parts to it? Do you want to get into earlier parts of the life cycle, later part? And again, I'm not trying to school them on what is the life cycle and what is A1 through A3 and all that business. I'm the filter. So it's like, you tell me your concerns, and my team and I, they're smart, we'll come up with something. And so from that, we came up with this essentially process for how to do this in a way that's reasonable. And then like a week later, I was in Ohio for Ohio Health, and I'm like riding high off of this thing. And so I'm like, hey, I got a wacky idea, and we're designing a women's and children's hospital. I have a wacky idea. What if we don't put cancer-causing chemicals in the women's and children's hospital? Well, they were way ahead of me, and they're like, specifically, we want to avoid all known chemicals of concern in order to support children's and women's health. The persistent toxic, they broke it down into more specific things about persistent toxic chemicals and bioaccumulation, and then there were specific areas that we called out. They went further in the weeds. Now, was that me because I had already had a conversation a week before and I came in at a different level? Was it them? It was mostly them. But that was fascinating, just this idea of this is who we are. Now look what happened. The narrative, the headline won the day. We're avoiding cancer-causing chemicals in the cancer center. It's easy to say, it's fun to say, you could see it on a t-shirt even. That's the headline that carries the day. How we do it is a lot of work. But I think in sustainability, we have a tendency to go right to the work, right into the weeds. And one of the things that I instruct my team not to do, even though they do it a lot, is don't get into the weeds with the client. Because nuance is death. I mean, once you get into the nuance, that's the trouble. There's a joke that I have in my Living Future talk that I'm giving this week, where I show a bowl of brown rice and a bowl of white rice. And I'm going to ask the audience, I'm like, which one's healthier, brown or white? Shout it out. And half the room's going to go brown and half the room's going to go white. That's the trouble.
The quinoa that comes from the background.
And so we're still playing this game that I've been seeing for 35 years, where we're our own Debbie Downer. Well, incandescent bulbs give off a lot of heat, but, compact fluorescent bulbs aren't great either because they contain mercury. And I'm like, yes, but don't do that in front of the client. Isn't the better version just to get to the lower EUI, just to switch them off the bulbs and baby steps? And isn't the better solution to design for daylight so you don't need to turn on the damn lights in the first place? Let's zoom out a little bit to see the big picture here, and especially put ourselves in their shoes of how they're seeing it. Because they don't want to become experts, and they don't need to become experts the way that we are. And I think that's been part of the problem, is we've been so excited to show our enthusiasm for our nerdiness. And I'm as guilty of it as anybody, but I find You don't want to do that with a client. You want to sell them on the story and the narrative on the headline. And then that gets them real excited, because then they'll repeat that headline thousands of times to their staff and their funders and their customers and their stakeholders. And that's really what's needed.
Well, and just even by extrapolation here, those friction-free kinds of headlines are the ones that rise to the top and people carry home to their dinner conversations, et cetera. And I think, too, there sounds like an example of removing some friction, particularly even through decision fatigue. There's so many decisions that happen along the way that if you start to get into the weeds of this, you may never get to your goal. So I'm curious if this is one of the ways that you're finding you're removing friction in customer conversations just by helping the decision-making process.
Well, if you mean if I'm making the decisions for them, yes, we're trying as much as possible. This was something I discovered early on in my residential practice, where I'd show them a bunch of materials for their kitchen counter or something, and I'd be sitting there thinking, gosh, I hope they don't pick that one. And then I thought, why did I even show them that? You know, why I showed them that because I thought they were supposed to see Corian, so that's why I should show them an epoxy, even though I don't like epoxy. And it's funny how we do things almost on autopilot without thinking, because we think we're supposed to. And so it started with that of, I'm only going to show healthier finishes. And now we're doing this within Canon Design. We just overhauled our specs. And there's other firms that are doing similar things. And Gensler's doing stuff, Perkins & Will is doing stuff. I mean, there are lots of firms doing stuff. But what's funny is we're all kind of realizing this at the same time. We changed our specs in two big, bold ways. Number one was, instead of opt-in, you have to opt out. Again, this was a friction. We had, if we had alternative, healthier specs, the friction would be me trying to educate them to opt into.
To upsell, almost.
Upsell. And I think, why am I doing that? Let's switch those around. The onus is on you. If you want to opt out of the healthy, you have to do that. So that was number one.
And it's a conscious decision to opt out.
Yeah, I'm relying on their laziness and their busyness, basically. So you have to consciously opt out, not me. So I'm essentially eliminating the friction and putting it on you. That's number one. Number two was, specifications are thousands and thousands of products. Surely, and my team was like, surely you don't want us to update all of them. And and I said, well, don't call me Shirley. But let's start with the most pernicious. Let's start with the biggest culprits. So let's triage it a little bit. Well, first I called it the dirty dozen. And then I got outvoted. Now we call it the watch list. We have a healthy material watch list and a embodied carbon watch list. And there are basically a dozen materials that we thought were the most kind of sinister and the ones that should be changed first. We're tying that into what we did with the Cancer Center folks of like creating a review system. We're then pushing back with the manufacturers saying, look, this is what we're doing. This is our big vision. And so we're having conversation, like Tim Conway, who I just adore at Shaw. He's head of sustainability at Shaw. Basically, if I say to him, look, we're not going to order any vinyl back carpet ever again as a firm, and we might not get it perfect, but that's the policy. He then takes that and goes to his bosses and say, look, we're going to lose. We need to innovate here. And so having that kind of, I guess, built-in feedback loop to manufacturers, to clients, and then to ourselves helps accelerate this even further.
And there's market levers you can pull.
Right, but it's also, there's this larger story of, it's very easy for everyone in the firm to understand, oh yeah, we're phasing out vinyl. That's the headline. How we're doing it is super complex. And lots of meetings and lots of discussion and lots of review and lots of research. But again, we're the filters here. So it's a very different approach to change management, where I don't need them to see behind the curtain and see what the great Wizard of Oz is doing. I just need them to see the spectacle and know that we're moving in a good direction. A little different. Yeah.
Tell me about, I love this idea of friction, the friction of innovation being like rug burn. If you've ever been a kid pushing around Matchbox cars on the carpet, familiar or intimately familiar with that rug burn. But tell me about that painful resistance that you've experienced in your work and some of the ways that you've educated your clients to overcome that friction.
A lot of it is preemptive. Like, you'll have a lot of clients that will speak for other people. For example, they'll say, well, I don't think the C-suite will go for it, or I don't think facilities will go for it. They're not facilities. They're just speaking on their behalf. So now I've learned to listen for that. Like, well, let's ask them. Let's invite them in. Let's have, let's have the conversation. But you learn very early on, well, you don't even know what you're talking about. So the preemptive, and again, it's their brain looking for any excuse to shut it down. And now that I've accepted that it's not them, it's their amygdala, and it's their amygdala to blame. It's like, okay, let's do that. But these shutdown phrases, you train yourself to listen for. One big shutdown phrase is the straw man argument of, well, I heard I heard these materials cost more. I heard they're not as durable. Which materials? Let's talk about it. Let me show you. And we burn a lot of time showing clients those studies. But another famous one is where they throw a bunch of work back at you. Why don't you spend a bunch of hours doing a life cycle cost analysis and get back to us? They're really just deferring judgment. And again, if you're holding the tiger by the tail, there's no reason to do that. So let's get commitment. So you're saying if I can show you that it has a life cycle cost or net present value that's positive, you're already agreeing to it. We're going to establish. Everybody hear this? We all hear. Put it in the meeting. Because I'm acknowledging that they're deferring the decision, so I'm not letting them. And so it's aggressive, and it's not for everybody. And the thing is, a lot of people in sustainability are very, very nice. I'm not, but a lot of normal, healthy, well-adjusted people are. And so, like, getting my team to do this has been a challenge because they are so genuinely nice and sweet. Like, no, you have to be kind of a jerk a little bit. So there are a lot of examples of these shutdown phrases that just keep occurring. And once you train yourself to listen for them and not take it personally, well, then you can find ways to overcome each one. And that's been the interesting part. And if you talk to a typical sustainability person, they'll have these like kits or these tools in their tool belt to do it. But I think I've kind of formalized it because I understand it's coming from both a psychological and a behavioral and a neuroscientific thing. So I don't see it as adversarial, like it's me versus them. I see it more as I'm nurturing and coercing and manipulating a little bit, but bringing them along without forcing them to have to be educated. They don't need a PhD in material science in order to pick a healthy floor. They need to understand that they're getting something that, yes, will meet their needs, and they don't need to worry about it.
If not exceed their needs.
If not exceed, right.
Tell me about, you've given me some examples here of the conversation that you have, particularly around materials, around changing minds, changing frames of minds and reference there. But let's play this story out. How did that flooring conversation go? What were the results that came out of this seemingly small decision in a sea of decisions, but yet I'm imagining there might be some profound effects that come from this.
One of the benefits of getting to work on so many projects, our sustainability team works on hundreds of projects at a time. I think we're very much coming from an abundance-based mindset here, and that's counter to a scarcity-based mindset that I think most people have. The abundance-based mindset says every challenge is an opportunity, right? Every obstacle is a chance for us to reinvent and improve. That means that you're welcoming dissent. What scares you about this idea? Like, you're welcoming those comments. Whereas with scarcity, your goal is to eliminate those comments. It's a very subtle but important distinction of mindset. If everything becomes a design opportunity, then suddenly that's where the joy comes in. So it's really starting from that place. This was. I had this fortune of working for 3 incredible nonprofits in a row: Living Future Institute, Eco Districts, and then X Prize. And by the way, the founder of X Prize, Peter Diamandis, wrote a book literally called Abundance, like basically spelling this out. So if it wasn't clear to me before then, it became clear as soon as I saw Peter's book. But this idea of switching those mindsets, and then you have to do that with the client, because they're coming from a scarcity-based mindset. They're told, your job depends on building the thing as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible and keeping it on budget and on schedule. Right, so they're feeling the constraint.
They're trained on scarcity.
They're literally trained on it. So to switch them over to that is fun and it opens their eyes. But they're not going to do it all at once. And because we're working on so many projects at once, I mentioned Ohio Health. We designed, just in the last few years, we've designed 3 different buildings for them. Each one got greener and greener. And by the way, the budget for each one got bigger and bigger, which is great for them. But it was kind of amazing to watch. They look back now at the first building and go, oh, we see what you were doing, because we were pushing them then. And so you can only push people so far, right? So I'm pushing them out of their comfort zone, but they're, not to get sexual, but it's almost like they have a safe word of like, okay, that's but each one got greener and greener. And then the other thing that we've gotten to see with a lot of clients is where they didn't have any sustainability department before, and then in the course of working with us, now they do. And in some cases, we get to help them craft the job description. In some cases, we help them recommend candidates for who they should hire. We will recommend to them, here are the standards and commitments you should make. So if it's healthcare, it's like the HHS Climate Pledge or Practice Green Health. If it's education, the Second Nature Commitment. Like there's lots of stuff there to feed them. So we're their partners with them on this journey. I don't expect them to be as green as as I am or they are or whatever. It's really about what are their needs, what are they listening to, and how can we be of service to them. And so switching this to this abundance mindset is key to that. And I probably never say, I'm going to switch your mindset. I mean, they look at me like I was nuts. But they're feeling it because, like a typical email or call, oh, bad news, this happened. Oh, no, that's good news. What do you mean? Well, because now we have an opportunity to rethink this. So I love going through that with them. Right, I'm not selling them on sustainability. I'm selling them on the benefits of sustainability. That's the difference. And it's very subtle, but we call it an outcomes-based approach to sustainability inside Canon for that very reason. And that's what we essentially try to teach everybody that joins the firm.
Well, I'm hearing themes of resiliency too, particularly in the pivot. If you like calling with bad news, I think that's a really good example of how just your system of language can help change that conversation of, what do you mean? This is good. What do you mean? That catches them off guard. That's unexpected. You can now really open their eyes to opportunity, and what could be that switch over to abundance thinking is not immediately natural to ourselves, at least to me, and it's something I have to practice continually, but it gets easier the more you practice to slip into that pivot. Do you find that resiliency and abundance start to marry up together? Or maybe let me put a finer point on that question. You've gotten so many chances to make decisions along the way. Not all of them fall in your favor. There's definitely going to be problems and timelines, and things go wrong. The best laid plans often go astray. So not something that I expected to ask you about, but unpack abundance and abundant thinking. Is this something inherent to you? Is this a inner strength that you've developed over time?
I don't know about inner strength. It's a coping mechanism.
I understand exactly what you mean.
Here's the thing. Eventually you get to the point where you realize that this scarcity-based mindset is not only limiting, but it's a downward spiral. It does not lead to more happiness. It leads to the opposite. It leads to maintaining. Bill McDonough has a joke that he tells a lot of the same jokes over and over again, but he's got a joke, and it's a good joke. And he says, if I asked you, how was your marriage? And you said, sustainable. Sorry, that's a good joke, right? And that's the thing. Scarcity-based mindset is always going to lead to like cheaper, lower, slower, just everything downward. Abundance is essentially the answer to a lot of the world's problems. Right? There's no shortage of money, especially in this country. There's no shortage of food. It's just unevenly distributed. Norway, something like 90% of the vehicles in Norway are now electric. So the future is here. It's just unevenly distributed. So it just becomes this very interesting realization of, if you're really at all interested in resource management and you're looking at the world in terms of its resources, you realize we have no shortage of anything. One of the examples I give to clients is I say, look, every day, 5,000 times more energy falls on your site for free than you need. You can choose to collect it or you can choose to ignore it, but it's there. And they're like, huh? It's just on a very different level than what they're used to. But it's also, if you think about it, what's really happening, Richard, is this is me saying, I'm not going to keep playing this game that we've been playing for 35 years, where you say, well, I heard solar's too expensive. And I go, no, it isn't. Here, let me spend a lot of time proving to you otherwise. Because that's me fighting that same scarcity-based mindset. I'm fighting your scarcity with more scarcity, and then bring everything down to the cheapest thing wins. Instead, I'm trying to break that codependency. I'm trying to break that cycle. With solar is not only is solar the cheapest form of energy, but you should be in the energy business. You could be a net energy exporter. And so the funny story there is, we were doing a hospital in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This is a campus that we've done a few buildings on their campus. It's a client that we love, and they love us. And so I knew there was a little bit of trust there that I could push them outside their comfort zone a little bit. And then I came in and I met our client, which is the head guy of facilities. And this guy. We have all had this guy. He's been in the role for 25 years. He's got the sweater vest on. He's good at his job. He knows the system inside and out. He knows exactly how to hold it together. He knows exactly what popsicle sticks and bubble gum to use to keep it running. That guy. We all have that guy as a client. And I walk in, And he says, just so you know, I hate sustainability.
And I don't like you either.
While we're at it, I don't like your stupid nose and your stupid hair. So this is how he greeted me. That was his first impression. And I didn't know what to say, because part of me wants to move into therapist mode and go, well, tell me, what do you
Who hurt you?
Yeah. Show me on the hemp doll where he touched you. Part of me is like, why do you hate sustainability? And all, but I knew I didn't have time for that. Instead, I said, let me just put him on his heels. That was my instinct. And he said, I hate sustainability. I said, me too. I said, let's not talk about sustainability. Right? I said, what's driving you crazy? Because remember, pain is the gateway to innovation. Mm-hmm. What's driving you nuts is going to be the thing you're most open to changing. Mm-hmm. So it's a strategy, but it's like, what's driving you crazy? He's like, you wouldn't understand. I go, well, I'm not. And he said, well, it's Wisconsin, and we get a lot of snow, and we spend $96,000 a year plowing snow. And I just play dumb. And I'm like, what's wrong with that? He said, because it melts, and then we get more snow, and then we do it again. It's just it's $96,000. Like, it's a lot of money. It's just a waste. And I said, what if I could solve that problem for you? He said, yeah, how would you do that, idiot? Like that. I said, well, that central utility plant that you've got, and you're asking us to figure out how to maybe eke another 10 years out of it. It's already 25 years old. It's an old steam-fired power plant. How could we get a little more life out of it? And you're about to spend $2 million investing in this thing. Let's not do that. Instead, let's give you a central utility plant of the future. Let's invest in geothermal. We'll get free heat out of the ground. Again, there's the headline, free heat out of the ground.
Emphasis bold on free.
Yeah, and then we can make your parking lot a snowmelt zone. Mm-hmm. As soon as snow's in the forecast, you flip a switch. And then the snow won't stick. And you'll never have to plow snow except maybe on the heaviest of days, but otherwise you'll never have to plow snow again. You could save most of that $1,000, and that'll be part of your payback for the new geothermal system. And oh, by the way, we're getting you off of steam, so that means chilled beams in all the hospitals. That's better infection control, better acoustics, less dust, less maintenance. Here, by the way, we didn't do it yet, but here's a payback that we can do. And just knowing that it was coming was enough. So we went in minutes from, I hate sustainability, what are you doing here? Why are you in front of me? To, I'm Mr. Sweater Vest's new best friend. Mm-hmm. Suddenly now, what else you got? Mm-hmm. I didn't do anything magical. I just listened to the guy, right? I didn't go in with a hard sell. I just went in with, it's Dale Carnegie 101, how to win friends and influence people. I just listened to his pain and thought, well, I've got a potential solution for that. Now, later on, we'll work out the kinks and the details and get into the weeds, but I need to get him to that enthusiasm. I need to convert him. Is it manipulative? Maybe, but it's also helping him. Steam is a dead technology. He was going to spend millions to fix it up and millions more to operate it. It was a dead end when we all know that it should be electrification. Did I go in with an electrification pitch? No, didn't even mention the word. And then, my favorite part was at the end when I said, oh, by the way, the government will pay for half of it. So again, I'm the filter. That's our job, is to be the filter. So that's how it all comes together in a very different way.
That filter takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of empathy that I would imagine. You have to be able to walk a mile in other people's shoes and understand their problems.
Design is the first signal of human intention. Design is the whole idea of us being empathetic. So I think what I'm doing is, I think sustainability and design have been separated, and really it's bringing it back together. First and foremost, I'm an architect. I like to design. I like to sketch. I like to create. That's still very much who I am as a person. So I'm just, whatever this gesture is, this is what I make the most. It's this weaving of this integration of design with the sustainability itself. I think maybe we lost that or something. The benefit of my my early mentorship with the Taliesin apprentices from Frank Lloyd Wright, or the early 1870s ecological guys, is they did stuff with their hands. There was this physical, if we put a wall in the sun, it's going to get hot, and depending on the material, it'll either store that heat or it won't. If we put an opening here, the air is going to be pulled through, so let's put another opening down. There was a tangibility to it that I really appreciated and really needed when I was 18, right? That I just loved. And that's still very much who we are. It should be integrated to the experience. And somehow we've lost this into a bunch of really complex sounding words, But we're forgetting at the end of the day, what we're selling is human experience, right? It's this kind of idea that I'm making something better. You know, going back to the cancer center, we have incredibly talented people at Canon that's all they do is to just focus on cancer center design. And they told me when I first started, they said the thing you need to understand about the cancer center is that everybody coming to the cancer center is terrified.
And may have cancer.
Yeah, they're either about to get a diagnosis, which will change their life, or they're about to embark on treatment, which hopefully will save their life. But they're terrified. That's striking to me. So the question that naturally comes up for me is, could we design the reception desk and the lobby to make them feel calm and at ease? And the answer to that, by the way, is yes. Through a very nerdy field called neuroarchitecture and using biophilic design and light and color and contrast and form and patterning, and the answer is yes. We can literally trigger serotonin in their brain to make them feel calm and at ease. Now, do I tell them all that? No. If they want to know, I'm happy to tell them. But really, we're the filter. We're behind. So we tell them the intention is to design a place that makes you feel calm. If they want to know how, yeah, we'll talk about it all day. But I'm getting them on board with the headline and the outcome and the benefit, not with, I'm basically doing what Simon Sinek says. I'm starting with the why, not the what or the how.
So you're known for combining empathy or turning empathy into a performance metric. I'm really curious how and I think you've given me some examples just even in that front reception area, but how do you quantify empathy or quantify emotion?
Yeah. Well, that we're still struggling with. So we're doing a regenerative campus for an amazing client, a top secret client, but it's a whole campus. And we started thinking about metrics, and the whole team started brainstorming metrics and how we quantify this. And they were all really nerdy metrics, and metrics that, by the way, aren't easy to quantify. They take a lot of work, they take analysis, and then the team started down this path of, well, do we create a bunch of scripts so that way we can hit a button and it can calculate it for us? And I said, no, it should be something so simple that a 5-year-old can understand.
Oh, I'm a big ELI 5 kind of guy, so explain like I'm 5. It's so easy, a 5-year-old can get it.
Well, I also just, my kid is now 16, and she's my favorite person, but, and I love her at 16, but, my favorite was when they're 5 to 10, that's just magical, because they're like, the world's just unlimited. And so explain it to like I'm 5 is just such a perfect thing. So the metrics became, there's 3 in particular that I love. They're my favorites. The first one is number of butterflies.
Okay.
And then there's only 3 options, because I don't think people are going to count butterflies. So it's none, so none butterflies, some butterflies, or lots of butterflies.
Okay.
None, some, or lots.
Quantifiable.
And so you walk outside and it's like, is it none, some, or lots? Now, to a lot of sustainability people, this drives them crazy. Because they're doing things to 3 decimal places.
Exactly. How many is some?
How many is some? Is that 3?
Is that like a few?
It's 3.2. So every 5-year-old knows what
Square
some
caterpillar.
But think about it, if there's lots of butterflies, our pollinator pathways are working, our hydrology systems are working, our living machine is working.
Indicator species.
Our food pathways are working. All of the work that went into it is working. The metric is the filter with the very clear result of none, some, or lots. And then there was another one, number of outside meetings. None, some, or lots. Are they having a lot of outdoor meetings? And if they are, that means that we design a place that they feel sheltered, that the acoustics work, that there's no glare on their screen, that they feel comfortable, that the furniture is comfortable, that they feel covered enough to be protective, but open enough to be visible, but also secure. And right, it's a very careful balance. But if I start measuring all those individual metrics, no, the result is number of outdoor meetings. Lots, great. And then my favorite one is decibels of laughter.
Ooh, I like that one.
I do this one for schools. And if anybody designs schools, one of the first things you learn is you go and you listen. And quiet schools, that's not a good school. A school should be a fun time full of joy and laughter, and you should hear it. And so decibels of laughter, especially on the playground, means we design the playground to be safe. They feel secure. They're watched. The equipment is engaging. It's colorful. They're playing.
There's self-organizing games.
Right. But if I do a typical sustainability metric of number of FTEs on the playground between the hours of 12 and 1:30, it's like, you just sucked all the joy out of it.
Number of sliders between these 2 hours.
Yeah, decibels of laughter is so much better.
Hands on the monkey bar. I like that as a metric.
So that becomes a very clear thing of, if you want to design a regenerative campus, which by the way is such a great value proposition, you're not selling some obscure metric of non-heat island effect with heat island effect with covered versus all that crap. I'm selling you fresh air, fresh water, nature,
sunlight,
warmth, it's. I think we've forgotten
Butterfly.
that. My students do this too. They get a question, and it's like, well, I came up with a 3.2, but it's not one of the multiple choice options. There's only a 3 or a 4. Which is it? I'm like, you really don't know between 3 or 4 what 3.2 would equate to? And they get so bent out of shape over this. I'm like, we round down. It's 3. The answer's 3. You should know that, And yes, I'm that condescending. So, yeah, I think, the CAD generation has kind of sucked all the joy out of one of my old mentors, Ken. We spent hours like huddled over drawings with red marker, redlining drawings. And I remember we were working on this very complex set of stairs and ADA ramps and this stuff. And he had a saying that he would say all the time. He would say, because he was an old hippie, he would say, close enough for rock and roll. Architecture, we're off by inches all the time. That's what shims are for. We have caulking and shims for a reason. This is not a precise thing. So close enough for rock and roll, close enough for architecture, right? So same thing with the metrics. We need to. These are metrics that resonate with clients. They understand. These are the things they come up in the tours when they're touring the building. And so we need to understand that. Right? We need to arm them with these outcomes that we're designing toward. That's really the thing. We just did a school for Caltech in Pasadena. It's a mass timber hybrid building, but the outside is this very parametric design thing. The whole thing faces west, and that's where the design came from. All that western glare in the afternoon would have been blinding. So the parametric facade is essentially designed to cut that glare. And it's all mass timber, and it's mass timber done in a very unusual way. And it gets a ton of awards. I must say it had bad words.
I think shit ton is probably appropriate here.
But my team was like, well, the EUI isn't as low as it should be. I'm like, will you shut up and just enjoy it? And by the way, it's LEED Platinum. It's a great building. But they're like, well, we wanted the EUI to be low. Just keep it yourself.
Or the open house.
Yeah, just go get another plate of cheese and shut up.
Is there a moment when that empathy has helped you unlock a success story that could have gone otherwise?
It's funny, I only remember where the empathy has gotten me fired.
Also makes for a good story.
I was doing a house in Marin County, which is north of San Francisco. Marin County is where the rich white people live. And we were starting the house, and I said, well, what do you want to spend on this house? And she said, I don't know, should we spend $3 million or $4 million? And she said it just like that, like casual. And I'm thinking, are you saying that to show off? Is this you bragging about how rich you are? Or are you really clearly that indifferent between $3 million and $4 million? And then what I said was, well, maybe you should spend $3 million, and with that extra $1 million, you could build houses for 10 families and transform the lives of 10 families. Like, wouldn't that be much better? So she fired me right away. And in hindsight, like, would I have changed? Like, I don't know.
I don't think, based on your origin story, that you should have or could have. It's why is it this way?
Well, see, here's the thing. I know there is a pathway that I could have gotten to where I could have had her build her house for $3 million and build houses for 10 people. I know, part of me knows that there's a multiverse timeline that exists where I actually got both. But my snarkiness, that was my youth. That was probably 30 years ago. But my snarkiness got in the way. Now that I'm old and grizzled, people don't take me seriously. When I was young, I looked angry, but now they're like, oh, he's harmless. So that's the thing. But it's still it's a great question. Like, if you're really that flippant about it, let's have the conversation. And now I would have handled it differently because I would know better. The empathy to me is our pathway into something. What I've discovered, and I'm talking about this in my Living Future talk this week, is there are really 14 ways to motivate people if you really just group them down, almost like Aristotle would, just this list. And some of them are pride, passion. Some of them are negative.
Embarrassment. I clean my house if someone's coming over.
Yeah. Like they sound like the 7 deadly sins. Shame is a big one. And then some of them are beautiful. Motivation, like, empowerment. And so I realized that I kind of made them as a list, and I realized, well, they kind of group together into this negative emotion version and this positive emotion version. And most of what we've been doing in sustainability for the last, I don't know, feels like 30 years, has been on this negative side. And I think that's a result of we're getting their scarcity mindset, we're getting their negativity, and we're countering it with an appropriate response, which tends to be more focused on the pride and the shame part. But that means that we're leaving this whole side of stuff untouched, right? These motivators of that really, I think if we tap into, could be our superpower. They could really channel something more. And they're really just saying, I'm refusing to have that conversation, that kind of scarcity-based infighting to the lowest common denominator thing. I'm going to switch you to this other mindset of, let's look at the possibility. Let's look at what's here. That, well, if you're spending $96,000 a year plowing snow, me finding a cheaper way for you to do that isn't really the answer, right? There's got to be something else. What if we didn't need to plow in the first? Just switching that mindset. So yeah, I think that's part of it, and the best part is it works, right? We're doing the greenest buildings we've ever done. I'm doing the greenest buildings I've ever done for clients where they've never done a green building before, or they've always wanted to, but we're afraid. So something's working, and now we're essentially, I hate this word, but institutionalizing it, making it part of the process. So it's baked in at the outset. Remember, at the end of the day, every sustainability person really is a change management agent. They're a harbinger of change. I was going to say chaos. They're a harbinger of, but in a good way. So if that means that we're in the innovation business, we're in the change management business, we have to understand clearly, how does this affect their brain when their amygdala is saying, no, don't do that. That sounds scary. And just be sensitive to it. And now I think empathy is a very easy way to do that. Yeah.
Before we move into our next segment here, just a quick recap. You've given so many examples here of empathy both in our human interactions, but also as a performance metric, and even encouraging your staffers and teammates to think with that abundance mentality. That's not an easy thing to do right out of the gate, especially when you've got clients and customers who are throwing their problems at you or at every turn. That's definitely a skill to develop there as a superpower. But then you've also given examples here of friction, and a term I learned not so long ago is removing optionalism, is just giving the choices that you want and pick out of these good choices, and even just how you're presenting information in detail and delivery. How much detail and how are you delivering this is all part of a communication strategy and all part of the way that we help that transformation take place. Any other thoughts there before we move on?
So I do a lot of these workshops, as I said, like it's about 100 a year. The in-person ones are the most fun because you can see everybody, you can read the room, you can feel the energy of the room. Online, Zoom or Teams, it's different, as you know. But what's funny is and this is going to sound like bragging, but it's the truth. Routinely, the client will come, this just happened last week, client will come up and say some version of, I do a lot of these workshops, because they're the facilities people, right? I do a lot of these workshops. Yours was by far the best one I've ever been in. And I never know what to say to that, because what I want to say is, yeah, that was my goal. My goal was that this be the best workshop you've ever done. That was the whole point. That was what we were after. And with the team, we vision what does that success look like? If we're doing a workshop, we should have a vision for what a successful workshop is. We're doing design, we should have a vision for that. And we hear it a lot. But it started, that whole idea of that's my goal is I want to give you the best experience you've ever had. It started probably 20 years ago. After I started introducing more and more humor into the talks, just naturally, I'd been holding it back, but then letting it go, and then shaping the talks around these kind of like, using jokes to pull people back up. Because here's this depressing bad news about here, but it's funny, right? Here's this more depressing pulling it back. So somebody came up to me after a talk. I was giving a conference or something, and I don't remember the guy, but I remember what he said, which is he said, "You had a lot of fun up there, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I could tell." And then I talked to my comedian friends, and they said, "Yeah, the audience can tell when you're truly into it versus when you're phoning it in." And then I realized I've seen so many presentations in the design world where the presenter's phoning it in. And I don't know why. I don't know if they don't like talking in front of people, or they're shy, or, or they're whatever, or maybe they're tired, but you can't do that. I want my enthusiasm to be contagious. I think being effusive is infectious and contagious. If you're excited about it, they'll be excited about it. So yes, it's very much part of a larger strategy. If I go up there and go, the lead MR 3.1 credit includes this, this, and this, and you need this percentage, like, first of all, who's going to stay awake for that?
Exactly.
But what are they going to really get out of it? But I go, oh my God, the lead MR 3.1 credit, what a pain in the ass that is. Talk about it. Right? There's going to be a difference there. At USGBC, if you're listening, I'm sorry. But that's part of a larger strategy, yes. And it's funny because does it mean that everybody will like this message? No. No, and there are plenty of people that don't. I mean, I used to get hecklers. Do you ever get hecklers?
I've gotten a few flames online, but...
Well, yeah, like, I mean, like, where they, like, stand up and start shouting at me at the
not
stage.
yet.
And again, I'm used to this.
Occupational hazard.
I'm used to this from comedy, but never like in a sustainability thing. But what people forget is, first of all, I'm on stage, they're not. I have a microphone. They do not. I also have like 30 quips ready to go. You do not. But they don't happen anymore. But it used to happen a lot. And I don't know if it doesn't happen because I've softened and I'm not pushing people to the point where they need to heckle me or what, but it's very telling.
Hey, that could be part of your vision if you're pushing people so far as you get...
Well, no. Well, the thing is, if you're presenting to anybody about anything, you want to push people because the worst thing in the world is, well, what'd you think of Freed's talk? Yeah. Like that would be the worst.
It was
You want people to say, I loved it or I hated it. And to be honest, at this point in my life, I'm happy either way because then that's where we can have a conversation. What did you hate about it? What did you love about it? If they're like, yeah, it was fine.
It was fine.
It's kiss of death.
Exactly.
For a performer, that's the worst. And so when people come up to me afterwards and they go, oh, I loved your talk, the first thing I'll say is, well, what was your favorite joke? Because that's what they'll remember. And then they'll say, and then what's funny is they'll say, the fart joke on the water tower. And I think that just amuses me so much, making them repeat that back. Fart joke was so funny.
That was a knee slapper.
Yeah. So that's just me being immature.
Well, in our work, I love potty talk. It always is a crowd pleaser. So I'd like to introduce you and invite you here to the community garden portion of our conversation. Have you ever done the rose, thorn, bud framework before?
You warned me about this.
I did. Give you a little heads up. And then just as a quick refresher, rose is something that's blossoming in your world these days that's particularly fragrant. A thorn is sort of the opposite of that, what brings blood to your fingertips. And then the bud is hope for the future. So Eric, tell me, what's going on in your garden? It's spring here in Portland. It's beautiful. Metaphorically, literally. I know. I've got the spring fever. I'm ready to get outside.
There's a lot to be hopeful about and be thankful for. A lot of roses.
City of roses.
We are the city of roses. My dog's name is Rosie.
Oh, there you go.
So there's no shortage of that. I'm trying to think of like a fun, obscure one, but I see it every day. So to me, the excitement is, like I just talked with a company, they're making hemp-based studs.
Okay.
And they're not what you're picturing, by the way. They're alternatives to metal studs. So they're C-channel, but they're not solid 2x.
That isn't what I...
And what a great product, and so brilliant and simple, and I love that. There's another company that's making an alternative to drywall out of carbon. They're sequestering carbon out of the air and putting it into it looks like gypsum, but it's not. There's another company that's making an alternative to leather from strawberries. Like there's just amazing things like that. And remember, I'm out looking for these things and talking to these folks every day, so I'm harvesting all these. So the bio-based movement is about to explode, and that's a fun metric of how much of the materials in your building was grown is a beautiful metric, and one that I really want to start tracking. The thorn. Well, there's the funny thorn for me is like expense reports and timesheets. I don't think anybody's really bad at them because it's just I don't know why. I don't know what it is. My immaturity just keeps me from doing them. But also, not to get political, but how can you? Seeing the government shut down tools and websites and things that were working and were fine and were already figured out, like why shut them down? They're not bothering anybody. That to me is insane. And then the bud is, and this is going to sound cynical. There's along within the sustainability movement, there's been this idea of these two very different camps, and this is something that. Adam Werbach did a talk about this like in 2005 or something, I remember. the death of environmentalism, right? And so the idea, the two camps are either we need to keep pulling ourselves back from the brink. We need to, we're headed off a cliff, so we need to slow down. The other camp is, no, we need to hit rock bottom. We need to go off the cliff. No real change is going to happen until that happens. They both have their pros and cons. But I think we're at the point now where everyone has felt climate change. When I go around the country, this is no longer hypothetical. They've all lived through it. They've experienced it. They've witnessed it. When I first went to Alaska in 2003, I remember they had evidence of climate change. We were getting a tour, and they said, "Oh, we've never had moose come this far north before. We've never had mosquitoes this late into the season before. We've never had the glacier retreat this much before." They could see it with their own eyes. They could point to it, and that was very powerful. Well, now I feel like 20 years later, the entire world has now experienced that. We've never had these heat waves in December before. We've never had floods like this. We've never had storms so powerful. We've never had wildfire smoke. Everybody's now experienced this.
It's a season these days. It was never a smoke season.
So the bud to me is, you can deny climate change all you want. To me, it's like denying gravity. Go for it and have fun. Go for it. It doesn't change the fact that is still going to happen. So it's leading us to this idea that we're going to have to take action whether we like it or not. And for many of us in sustainability, we've been waiting for this moment. So now it's here. So I think that's a good thing, oddly. And that's me seeing the silver lining. But it's good that things have gotten so bad, because now the real work can begin. And that's
that echoes the middle point of our conversation of deliver when you get that call of bad news and say, oh, this is a great opportunity to pivot.
That was intentional.
I can see that. Nice job. So continuing on this gardening theme, who have been your gardeners to help you to grow? And alternatively, opposite of that, who are you helping to grow?
Gosh.
It's kind of a big two-part question.
I've been very fortunate. I had mentors very early on when I was still, knowing that I wanted to be an architect since I was 8. So when I was in high school, I was writing away to these folks. When I was in college, I was sending them blue lines. Blue lines were the old blueprints. I mean, now we just print, but we just run blueprints of my school projects and send them for critiques. And then I was working for them right after graduation. I had a lot of mentors on the design side, but then there were also indirect mentors, authors, and I think this whole change management theory, the Carol Dweck book, Growth Mindset, the Peter Diamandis book that I mentioned about abundance, the Simon Sinek book, Start With Why, or Real Leaders of the E-Glass, philosophically, that's shaped a lot of this change management approach. And then design-wise, any designer that's having fun with it, where they're building these places that are warm and fun. There's hundreds of just incredible designers out there. They might not even be doing sustainability, but I can see the joy in it. And they've done this empathy-based approach. They've gotten in the head of their client to design something so perfect. We can do that with sustainability and integrate in that way. And then the second part of your question, not a lot of people know this, but so I started, I'm so old. I would get these letters and then eventually emails from students. And eventually there were so many that I couldn't keep up. And I didn't know what to do about it. So I ended up building a series of courses, for lack of a better word, where I pre-recorded these videos. And so now when they write me, I send them, it's automated, but I send it, but it's an automated response that said, okay, if you want to talk, here's a long list of stuff that I've created for you. And I have them go through it. And some of them are videos, some of them are TED Talks, some of them are PDFs and resources. And I go, when you've had a chance to go through that, then let's talk. And a couple things happen. One is I could help a lot more people. But more importantly, because I tried to meet with as many of them as I couldn't keep up. Instead of having the same conversation over and over again, which is what I was having, now that I've sent them this stuff, they're coming back and able to talk about their goals, how they want to change the world in a much higher level, much deeper way. So the quality of the conversation is much better. One of the things I send them is a goal-setting worksheet. And it's basically the same version of this goal-setting that I use for myself. But here's this worksheet. It's this pretty PDF. Fill it out, make some decisions about your future, and then let's talk. And I still talk with them. And so I've been able to mentor, I can't even keep count, but tens of thousands of people individually, one-on-one, just very slowly. How do you scale this thing, right? So I'll meet with somebody for 20 minutes and can have a conversation, but and hopefully put them on the right track. And the idea is, I was lucky enough to have mentors, so if I could mentor other people. So I've really tried to formalize that, and I've been doing that for over 25 years.
Well, I'm feeling pretty lucky for today's conversation too.
Well, no. I mean, as much as I like you, it's not about you. It's about everybody who's going to watch it, right? Yeah. That to me is the interesting part. So, on my old firm website, I used to have a page just for them, and it was written a letter to students, and it was basically starting that journey. But all that idea, because remember, what the world needs is I need more innovative, free-thinking people. What I don't need is a bunch of, a bunch of architects that are going to design strip malls and Kmart's. Like I need them brave enough to face the challenges that await them. So the mentorship is starting to do that, to empower them. Don't wait until you're perfect. Start now, and trying to scale that. And so the video library, I grew it and grew and grew it. And then when COVID hit, I kind of thought, well, this is good enough for now. And so, yeah, when people write me, it starts them on this like pipeline of they go through this stuff, and they still get to talk to me. But
super cool.
Yeah, and it's free. I don't charge anything for it. But it's just a way to try to do that. And then what's great is I've been doing so long that people come up to me at conferences and say, I wrote you in 2010. And I go, did I write you back? And they go, yeah. I go, what did I say? And they said, well, you said this and it was great advice. I'm like, oh, imagine that. Okay.
Okay, friend, last question here in our conversation. We both live here in the bounty of the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
I never get used to how pretty it is here, but tell me about one of your favorite places in nature.
So when I lived in New Mexico, I found that I craved water, and not because it's dry there. That's a silly part.
Correlation does not cause causation.
No, it's just that I grew up in Philadelphia and New York. I'm used to having water right there, and I missed it. And so I love Santa Fe, and living there was beautiful. But every weekend we'd seek out the water. I would go to a lake, and there's a lot of lakes. And so one of my favorite things is sitting with a inflation, invest thing, a swimmer vest, and just sitting in a lake and just surrounded by mountains. That's my favorite thing ever.
And literal mountain bathing.
But started doing that in Santa Fe just because I was craving the water, and then left Santa Fe for San Francisco, where there's a ton of water, even though you don't get into the water much there because it's shark infested and freezing. But it's there, and just feeling the gravity and the mass of it was something. And then, of course, Portland is the convergence of three rivers, and so I was in the river yesterday. So, yeah, there's something about that. The water with the trees I like. I mean, I like forest bathing too, but the Pacific North, the thing I always tell everybody, if you're going to come to Portland or Seattle or anywhere in the Pacific Northwest, you must seek out a waterfall. You must get at least one waterfall in. And we have how many here? Countless. So, that kind of encapsulates it. I had this wonderful hippie girlfriend a long time ago. I've been married 20 years, so before that. But her favorite thing to do was to go out and drag me out into nature and then just strip off her clothes and jump in the water. And I think part of that is in my head, right? The freedom of just letting the nature just envelop you like that. And you can do that here.
Yeah, plenty of places to go out and be by yourself.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, you go with people. You can bring friends. But yeah, going alone is fun too. Going with a dog. My dog, I had to literally pull her out of the river yesterday.
Rosie?
Rosie, yeah.
What kind?
She's she looks like a pit bull Dalmatian, but she's actually a Staffy. But she looks, we call her an American house hippo. She looks like, she looks like a baked potato on sticks. She looks like, she's a little fat, but she's a river dog. So, but we had to come on. That was yesterday. Yeah.
Well, Eric, I really enjoyed our conversation here. It's been quite an adventure. I have enjoyed just hearing about empathy as that performance metric. We talked about frictionless innovation, which is such a big topic to even unpack. I feel like we only scratched the surface. We talked about building up those super skills, communication, storytelling being a big one there, and how to break some of that tension and anxiety, eco feelings, eco grief, etc., with humility and humor. And I think that that's an important message to carry through this conversation. So I hope that you'll come back for another chat.
Anytime.
I've really enjoyed this, and I'm happy to be in your circle of people that you have influence with and work together with. So it's particularly sweet to have this kind of conversation with you. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So I hope you come back for another episode. And for those listening along, I hope that you'll come back for another episode of Net Positive. Please like and share. We look forward to seeing you back here again on our next episode. We'll see you around.